Hey y'all, Andrew Mack here, and this is Loblolly Press In Conversation. I've got a bonus episode for you this month, and before we get started, I do want to just issue a quick thank you to our paid subscribers over on Substack. You're actually hearing this episode first, and your support helps us keep sharing these kinds of conversation, these ones about craft, about publishing, about collaboration, about the literary community in the South. We're going to try to release several of these episodes each year. And your subscription actually goes directly toward being able to produce these, being able to work on books for the press. The writers also support them. So if you're not yet a subscriber, you can find us at loblollypress.substack.com. And we do have a free trial option as well as a few subscription options that you could check out. And we would love to have you in this community. Today's guest is one of my favorite people, someone that I'm very excited to call a new friend, Lib Ramos. She is the brilliant mind behind Good Printed Things. They're an indie press based in Greenville, South Carolina. They're similar to Loblolly Press in a lot of ways, and also quite different in a lot of ways. But we're so excited to be collaborating on this project, a chapbook by Garrett Ashley. It's a small book of poems called A Field Guide to North American Trees. And whereas Garrett is a phenomenal fiction writer, he's an equally phenomenal poet. And we're really excited to get some of his first published poetry out into the world. A chapbook, of course, is something we'll talk about in this episode. We'll also talk about what it means to be an independent publisher in the South, some of the challenges we faced, some of our origin story. We'll also talk about what it's been like to collaborate and to kind of share a little bit about what we're building together and why we think poetry and chapbooks and great design really matter as publishers. So if you're a writer or a reader, maybe you're dreaming of starting your own press or you're dreaming of getting published by a press, I think this episode is going to be like exactly for you. Let's get into it.
I really believe in the work that I do. And then I also don't want to do it at the cost of my own family and my own schedule. So I think there's always that finding the right balance between doing something that's meaningful and not missing out on what's meaningful already in your life. I think that's been a big thing I've been thinking through lately. Trying to.
Like when to say no.
When to say no, how to create boundaries around even things that are good can be really, really hard. I have 2 kids at home, and so, I never want them to feel like work is more important than them, especially when so much of what I do is very self-driven, self-imposed deadlines. And so, yeah, it's kind of top of mind, and maybe I will always be figuring that out, but it's definitely been something I've been thinking about a lot recently.
Having your own business can feel a lot like you could put unlimited time into it and it could still take more.
Yeah.
So having to set those boundaries for yourself, I think it's been important for me, for sure.
And I think it's kind of a moving target. There's always going to be things that are changing and shifting. And even as my kids get older, that will change and shift, and just trying to kind of keep up with it and make sure that I'm feeling like I'm where I'm supposed to be with the amount of time and work that I'm giving everything and everyone.
So why do it then? What's the purpose?
I think what's interesting about my answer to that question is that it's a different answer than I probably would have given you when I started Good Printed Things. I have realized that it's really, really important to me to put words on a page. I think I started out more with I want to make beautiful books. I'm coming at this from a design angle, and so that was I love books. I've always loved books, and the idea of just making more beautiful books was compelling enough to get started and giving people a voice. And then I think that's shifted a little bit more toward priorities being giving people a voice and making their voices permanent in print. That has become kind of like my biggest why. I feel like, not, I guess we're going real deep, but, the idea of understanding that for a long time, I didn't have a voice or didn't choose to use my voice. And now trying to make sure that I'm making space for other people to have a voice and have an outlet for their words is really, really important to me.
It's amazing to hear kind of the evolution of how it started and when. Could you bring us back to that like moment when it began and what prompted it?
Yeah. So I have a degree in graphic design. And so I have always sort of taken on freelance projects here and there on the side, and everything from logos to websites to whatever kind of work came along. And I have a friend who's a writer, and I was kind of, I guess I can be a little bit, I don't know the right word, I'll say pushy right now, on behalf of someone else and their creative work. And so I had been saying, you need to do something. You need to do something. And then it became, we need to do something. We started talking about zines and how we could start really small and just do something just to get it out there. And that conversation ended up with us creating this recipe zine that is still a part of the Good Printed Things lineup. But that was sort of the first version of this. And it was this really beautiful and meaningful collaborative project with my writer friend. And we pulled in an artist that we both love. And then it started kind of snowballing a little bit. And so that in the end, it was, she referred to it as a potluck of a project, which of course is the perfect word for it, where we had art from two different artists. We had her words, we had my design, we had a typeface designer. All of us kind of rolled up together in this one little beautiful like recipe zine. And my takeaway from that whole project was, I want to do more of this. I said that out loud to her, and she kind of turned it back on me and was like, well, why can't you? And so after probably a year of just sort of sitting on that and marinating on that idea, I decided there's no reason I can't. And I couldn't come up with any better name. So I was like, I'm just going to call it Good Printed Things, which felt like a placeholder for a long time. But I think as with any brand, it's a vessel and you pour meaning into it. And over the last couple of years, I feel like I've sort of embraced that as my brand. And that's just what I do. I didn't want to limit myself to books. And I do some maps and zines and things, but for the most part, it's been books. It's been more books than I expected.
I see the good functioning in two ways now, as in like, I do make and design good printed things, and then also they do good in the world. I don't know if that's what your intention was at the beginning.
Actually, no, not at all. And I just worked with a friend of mine who writes copy to kind of help me articulate better what it is that I'm doing. Because for the longest time, I've not had an about page on my website. I've not known how to tell my own story and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So this is really good practice for me. But she asked me, what do you mean by good? Good is so subjective. What exactly? Let's talk about that. And it was a good exercise for me because I'm like, everyone defines good differently. It's a very subjective word. It's good in relation to what? And in all of the conversations, we didn't really touch on the good as in like good for us or good, doing good in the world. But I listened to a podcast that I love called Making Good. And it's a very creative approach to having and running a small business in order to be able to do good in the world. So it's funny that I didn't make that connection until right now, but it's cool that you're seeing that on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, even in your recent books, I think that they're highlighting known and unknown voices doing good in the world. Think of like Glennis's book, which Volume 2 is coming out. Thinking of, can you remind me of the name from, it was a book of haikus from a midwife?
It's called The Shortest Stories. And that's been a really fun first collection of poetry from another friend of mine who has been hesitant to call herself a writer. And I think helping be part of the process to put those words into a collection and publish it has been very, very fun for me to kind of watch her embrace the word writer and realize that she is a writer, even though when she started writing, it was for personal reasons and a creative practice for herself, never really intending for that to be published or out in the world. But creative work has this really beautiful way of making ripples. And I think that's what I love about helping put more creative work into the world and creating space for it, is you never know where those ripples are going to end up and who they're going to touch. And I think our conversation today is like a big piece of that, because I didn't know about Loblolly when I started. And like, here we are working on a project together. Mm-hmm. It's a very fun, serendipitous thing that also feels like it was probably set in motion long before we ever crossed paths.
Mm-hmm. I was actually going to point to, you were talking about how Good Printed Things is started as this collaborative effort among artists, designers to publish something beautiful and that had meaning. And I think about that, but you hadn't collaborated with presses before. And then, of course, we started collaborating together, and I was wondering if you could tell that story.
Yeah, it's very fun because I kind of have built Good Printed Things on this idea of collaboration. And whether it's writers or artists, I've even referred to myself as like a matchmaker, like talking about a book idea or the words and then trying to kind of pair that with the art or the artist that I feel like would best complement that. And so I think I've used the word collaboration all over the place ever since I began, and never once did it cross my mind to look toward other presses to collaborate. I'm a member of CLMP, which is the Community for Literary Magazines and Presses, which kind of opened my eyes to the idea that there are a lot of other small presses out there, which again, I didn't know when I started. But until you emailed, the idea of collaboration with another press was nowhere even on my radar. And I was so excited because I'm like, this is an angle that I've never even considered. So that was that. I mean, very much driven by you and your vision for a project. And I was like, absolutely, let's do this.
Yeah, I think the vision being like, I liked the work that you were doing, and there wasn't a spot in my calendar to do something I wanted to do. But I was like, I wonder if there's a project we could do together that would somehow like benefit both presses.
Yeah.
I mean, because when we do team up, not just as artists, but as business owners, there is more reach. There's opportunities for collaboration that lead to better work, more sustainable practices, business practices for ourselves, more accountability. I think as a business owner myself, and it being primarily me and my writers, I'm only really accountable to my writers. And so when it comes to the business side of things where, I can put that off, now we're working on a project together where there are certain things I cannot put off. And I actually kind of like that.
I actually have been enjoying it. I feel like, probably from our earliest conversation, it was really clear, like I have a lot to learn from this collaboration. I'm going to come out of this with a lot of new tools, and even just getting a window into how another publisher approaches and tackles project management and design and project planning and calendars and all of the sort of nitty gritty stuff that really wasn't, I wasn't thinking about those pieces when I was like, I want to start making books. It's been really, really good for me. In fact, I was telling my husband this week, this project has helped me, like force me to sort of stretch out my timeline on a project that I've been wanting to do for a while, but I just end up kind of working a lot closer to the wire than I mean to, because I'm very flexible with my project partners. And so having established a calendar on the front end, here's what we're going to do, here's when we're going to do it, let's work it all backwards. That's been such a good exercise for me. And it's as I'm thinking through how to do what I want to do more sustainably in a more balanced way, that's kind of like one of the components of like, okay, if I can tackle this in the same way that I've done this collaborative project, that just makes my life easier. So I feel like we all have so much to learn from each other. I love that you're saying it kind of came from a like, I want this to exist in the world, but I can't do it. Let's, work together on this.
Or I can't do it alone was kind of my thinking.
Yeah. I feel like I do that for people all the time. I have ideas and I've had to stop myself from saying this phrase too much, is that like, I have this idea, you should do it. And like, no one else needs more ideas to do. But I think it's way more of like, we should do this together when it can be successful. And that's where many, many of my book projects have come from, is a conversation that's like, you're doing something really cool over here. Can I help? I have this vision. Would you want to do this together? That's definitely how the haiku book came about. That's how Beth's book came about. And in fact, I think sometimes it's me grabbing seeds of like what someone else has said they want to do and say, can I come alongside you and make that happen? That's really the story behind The Song of Everything, the book that I did with Glennis. I was aware of her work, following her work online. And she posted on Instagram that she'd been visiting the state parks with her grandson and would love to do a poetry park tour. And that lodged itself in my mind somewhere. And I was like, man, I'd really like to be part of that project. And so I waited a really long time and sat on that because I felt like I don't even know this person whose work I really admire. And I feel very uncomfortable just kind of like inserting myself into their creative process. But after a while, as Glennis posted more and more about the state parks, I got up the nerve to email and say, hey, this is a thing you mentioned online. And I probably caveated it by saying like, maybe it's creepy that I know that because time had passed. But if you're serious, I would love to chat about how we can make this happen. And I had a couple books under my belt at that time. And Glennis was kind enough to say, well, let's have coffee. And now we're working on, this is technically book number 3 because we've got 2 books of poetry and a guided journal that we're working on together that will all kind of exist in the world. And I think that's been really fun for me to say, part of my role with Good Printed Things is to take someone's idea and help them turn it into a physical product, get them from idea phase or point A to point B. And that's something that I feel like I'm uniquely equipped to do. I can always do it better, but I have some of the, whether it's design or project management skills, to be able to say, I think we can take this idea and make it real.
We have to be so skilled to do all of those things. And it may not sound like humble, but we do everything, like both of us, our businesses, we each do everything. We do, of course, outsource some of the design maybe, or a few other things like that, but it really is a collaboration with the artist on getting their work from brain to final product. And I think one of the reasons I founded Loblolly was because I noticed that as a writer, I was always motivated to handle it all from beginning to end, where I would say, like, I'll create the art, I'll design the art, I'll create the product, and then it'll be out in the world, I'll distribute it and sell it. And I've just been scrappy that way. And part of the reason I founded Loblolly was because I don't think all artists want to do that. And so we fulfill, like, I think, a need in the literary ecosystem. And one thing I wanted to ask you about is, we're collaborating in Greenville, Asheville, but as a part of kind of a wider network of what I think is a really thriving literary community in the South. Where do you feel like you fit into that?
I wouldn't do it if it didn't matter to us in some way or another, because it's a lot of work start to finish, and different pieces of it are maybe more comfortable than others for different publishers. But to go from start to finish and sell the book and get it onto the bookshelves, or it's just it's none of that is, or maybe I should say, all of that is not going to come easy for everyone. So there's parts of it that are just more hard fought than others. And maybe as we grow, we'll get help to help us with some of those harder parts. But for now, yeah, we are wearing all the hats.
Yeah. And I don't want to glorify having to wear all the hats, but it is certainly a part of our...
It's a necessary piece of getting things started. And it makes you ask the question, as we grow, what would we want to hand off? What pieces what does growth even look like for good printed things? And that's something I come back to a lot because I don't know. I've said, I think for me, the thing I would love to outsource first is sales, because that is a piece that is not natural to me at all. But having to wear that hat for a time is giving me a huge appreciation for what goes into selling and where I can get better at things. So none of it is wasted at all.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I really answered your question.
I was actually going to summarize and say that I think that what I heard you say about where you fit within the landscape, and maybe where I feel like I fit as well, is that it's very easy right now to dissociate and just not feel things because of how many horrific things are going on, not just for the disabled community, but for the queer community, for people of color. And so I think of when I produce something now, the question becomes, is this going to make people feel something in a way that is positive, like going to benefit them in the positive? Because if we turn it off all the time, we turn off all of those emotions when it comes time to feel things in our relationship or feel things with our kids or our closest friends, whatever it may be, we don't have those skills anymore. And I just feel like books give us that.
Yeah, I think fundamentally books are so important for us, for everyone to sort of open up our ability to put ourselves in each other's shoes. And I think that books do that in a million different ways. But that's a component of publishing that I'm very aware of. I've done a few anthologies, and I'm working on one that is about food memories. And I think, a big piece of those projects is being able to share a lot of different perspectives around a singular theme, because we all only know what we know. Our experience is singular. Even to us, between us and our siblings, like we have a very singular viewpoint. And if you don't read books and you don't talk to other people, you're missing out on so many perspectives that are valuable in just being a part of our world and being a part of our community and understanding where someone might possibly be coming from. I think that it's so, so important to keep making books that push our ability to understand each other.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about Field Guide. A Field Guide to North American Trees is the book that we're working on together. It's by Garrett Ashley. And it's a chapbook, which we've both realized we may have to define for some folks who aren't super into the poetry world. But a chapbook is essentially just a very short collection of poetry that usually is centered around a theme or something I might call like a thesis statement. And one thing I noticed when I was working with Garrett on his full-length collection, Habitats, is that the center section of that collection, really the true center of it, is a series of poems named after trees that all have a similar format, and they follow the structure of a field guide of trees. However, the poems tell a personal story of selfhood and self-realization and like relationship with the natural world, relationship with place. And I felt like that needed its own project because of how important some of the stuff that he was saying in there was. And that's when I reached out to you, knowing that it was one of my goals for this year to collaborate with another press on a project. And I knew you were the person that I wanted to do it with. I think I found you on Instagram. And so it was another reason why social media is actually really important for us as businesses. It's where we interact and connect with each other and often our audience. What I noticed from the beginning is that it really was a collaboration from the start, and that we decided what it was going to be together, because I didn't know. I had an idea of what the project could be, and I knew that I could do the editing part and the poetry part of it, but I wasn't sure that I was the person to do the distribution, the production, the design of it all, and how could we help each other with that. And then also just have someone to, even if we just had that first phone call together to talk about our work and the work that we're doing with each of our presses, that would have been valuable too. And so I really did feel like it was kind of a shoot your shot moment where it didn't, there was no negative that could come from it. And now so much positive has come from it. So I'm really excited to be working together on it. Is there anything you wanted to say just like off the bat about Field Guide?
I think what's really fun about this project is it feels like such a natural outpouring of the work that I was already doing. So when I began Good Printed Things, we started with recipe zine. It was essays and food. And I started down this path of like, I want to make the things that I wish existed. And so it started feeling a little just like all over the place. But the longer I did it, there were these themes that were emerging, and it was food, it was poetry, it was nature. And so by the time you reached out, you're saying, I have this poetry book. It's small format. This is my idea. It's about trees. It was sort of just check all the boxes. And so it was a very natural progression from the books that I'm working on into this, like, you know what? I've never officially done a chapbook before. I love the idea of this collaboration. I love the idea of creating sort of an intro to the full length piece. It's a very, I just think it's a creative way to get this work out in the world in a couple different packages. And then once we started talking, it was just like a fun creative exercise. What could it be? How big would it be? And how would we, how would this work? So yeah, I think for me, it felt like an obvious yes, because of the way it just really kind of like dovetailed into all of the themes I was already just starting to realize were themes.
Yeah, the thing that I kind of am most proud of, I mean, first of all, I can't wait for it to actually be out in the world. But one of the things I'm most proud of is that we decided very early on that it would be the prelude to his full-length collection. So us releasing A Field Guide to North American Trees in October, and then releasing his full-length in April of next year. And that we were even going to make the two books speak to each other in a design language is not something that I think I would have naturally done had I produced on my own the chapbook and then the full length. But I'm so excited to see them together. And it will, when the books are like both of them together, I think it will really, people will see Good Printed Things and Loblolly Press in that same world.
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
And I think it's worth mentioning that it began as sort of an excerpt from Habitats, but it has a few poems that belong just to Field Guide to North American Trees. I think it'll be really fun for people to kind of experience the same poems in a different context. And we're planning to make a fun little bundle set. You can get both. And I just think it'll be fun to see the response to it, because I'm very excited about these two things kind of coexisting, and also the way that they might introduce readers who are familiar with one of us to the other. And I think what we're doing as two presses is so parallel that it's just gonna it just feels like a really beautiful combination.
Yeah, it's the correct combination, I think.
Let's talk about chapbooks.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll say that I know that it's not technically a chapbook. The Song of Everything, it really is its own version of a chapbook. And I think when I'm thinking of examples and I want to share with people what it is, that's a great one, because it's very specific. It could be the section of a bigger book, but it's its own thing, and it lives in the world, and you can read it in 20 minutes and read it again if you want to, and again and again. And those to me are all hallmarks of chapbooks.
Yeah, not being a poet myself, I'm coming from the design world. The term chapbook was new to me maybe like 2 years ago. And I was introduced to it because a poet I know had a chapbook coming out. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, this is familiar in the sense that it's a zine type publication. A lot of chapbooks are staple bound. They're not big enough to have a spine. But once I started picking up and reading chapbooks, I found it so enjoyable. I think partially maybe it's kind of attention span related in this day and age, but like the theme as well. It's like, I mean, I took a stack of chapbooks with me to the beach this year, and where I can't really get into a book really well at the beach, I just find it hard to focus long enough when I'm also supposed to be paying attention to children and coming in and out of the water and whatever. The chapbooks were so perfect because I felt like I could sit there and just absorb things at my own pace. I mean, poetry is that way too, where it's just, you don't have to read an entire book of poetry. You can read one and then sit with it. And there's something really beautiful about that. I feel the same way about chapbooks, and even short stories to some extent, where it's just like, it's thought-provoking, and it's a really great way to get to know a poet and their work. That's kind of what I have discovered about chapbooks. It's a taste of someone's work. And then you kind of are like, boy, I kind of want more of this. Let's go find out what else they've written.
I think it's two of the three books that I've written are chapbooks. And I think part of it is like, as a working writer, as a person who has a full-time job plus Loblolly Press, trying to balance my writing with that, I don't always have time to write a full-length. I don't have time to write a full-length collection. I'm working on one now, but I've been working on it for 5 years. So, when you don't have 8 hours a day, 5 days a week to work on writing, a chapbook is a very easy way to say, like, I have something good to give to the world, and I want to say something right now, and it's going to be kind of short.
And I think that shortness, both in the creation and the consumption of it, is valuable.
Yes.
Because I have several full-length poetry books sitting on my nightstand, and I will read, I savor them. I read a poem here and there. There's also something really nice about finishing a chapbook. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you keep track of books you read with like a software or whatever. I just started using Storygraph. And there's this sense of accomplishment about, like, I started this book and I finished it. Check. We all have like giant to be read lists. And so there's something really nice about being able to actually consume something. And what I found with the chapbooks I purchase and read, I love passing them on. Like, mm-hmm. So I'll do that with books, like full-length books sometimes. I love leaving them in little free libraries when I feel like I'm done with them. But chapbooks are something I have found that I like handing to someone and being like, I think you would like this, and let it kind of keep moving its way through the world. And I don't know if you feel that way, but it's been kind of a fun thing to realize is happening.
I think it's accessible in the sense that, yes, you can actually just give away your copy, or it's also often cheap enough that you could buy two, mm-hmm. give one away and keep one for yourself, especially if the work that you're reading really means a lot to you. They're typically not published digitally, although they can be. And so they have this kind of ephemeral nature to them anyway. For example, for us, we're doing a limited print run. So we'll run a field guide to North American trees, and that will be it. We won't purchase anymore. So people getting a version of that will have a piece of history. And I think that that's important now too. I was thinking of like a metaphor for it, and I'm like, I think that chapbooks are like the Instagram story of books. They're written, they come and go, and there's kind of a limited time to be reading it, although those copies kind of live on and can be passed down.
I think that's a really good reason to follow the work of a writer who you like, because they may be making something that they won't always be making. And that's how I found out about the idea of chapbooks in the first place, is a writer who I followed was coming out with a chapbook. And I have that book, and it was like you said, very limited edition. Here's your chance to get it. Once they're gone, they're gone. And there's something really special about that. I feel like we see that in more of like the collector's world, with like trading cards and things that are rare and whatever, but we don't always think about it with books. And that is, I guess you think about it with older first editions, there are only so many, but I think when a book comes out these days, there's this feeling of like, well, I'll get it later. and that might not be the case with a chapbook. You might want to snag that. When the author is saying, I have a chapbook, it'll be available on this date.
I was thinking about how one thing I think that we do really well, and maybe something that's different than chapbooks in general, is that chapbooks can be designed well. They can be a thing that you are proud that it's a physical product in the world. It can also be a thing that is, throwaway almost, that it's very quick. It goes out. It won't last in a library. It's too thin, whatever. But I think we've done a really good job of balancing the design of it with the ephemeral nature of it. And I think Song of Everything, I know it's not technically a chapbook, but similarly is a beautiful book, and really is the book that I was going to tell you kind of inspired me to be like, wow, could we do this for like another project, like a similar format?
I think Song of Everything has been so fun because it is that very specific sort of topic and subject matter, and at the same time it's poetry inspired by state parks. And so there's this really lovely Venn diagram of people who love the outdoors and people who love to write. And it's kind of why we're doing the Take Note Journal, because there's a big overlap there. But it's also become sort of a gateway for people to give the book to someone who's maybe not a poetry lover, but they do love the outdoors, and introduce people to this, like, oh, I actually do kind of like poetry. Like, I understand what this is saying. And I guess all that to say, I think these smaller size books are just easy to throw in a bag, easy to give. They are just like, there's something really nice about them, even from a very practical, like, price point standpoint. There's nothing prohibitive about poetry. You can find it in a lot of forms. Yeah. I love following the account on Instagram. Poetry is not a luxury. And it just serves you up a poem. Yeah. I think it's every day. And just kind of like, all of our lives could stand to be a little bit more poetic.
I think a common misconception of poetry is that you do have to spend a lot of time with it. So the chapbook being something you can go through quickly and maybe you will or you won't reread it again. If you're crazy like me, you really, when I sit down with a full-length collection of poetry, I tend to read the whole thing in one sitting. I don't dissect each poem line by line. It's actually part of kind of the editorial philosophy of Loblolly, is that if it's, I'm probably not going to give a poem 2 or 3 reads, I might give it 2. But really it's about how it makes you feel. And I think once you know that it makes you feel something, then you can focus in on, okay, is the language, what's doing that? Is the language doing that? Is the structure, is it the way the images the poet uses? And then I think of like, okay, well, we can work on those things. We can like strengthen that. But if it doesn't make you feel something, then even if it has the best form ever, to me, it's not something I would want to read or publish.
Yeah, and from a reader standpoint, I think there's also a noticing component. So I was just reading a collection of poetry that I was telling my partner Andrew about it, and just saying, I don't think I really get it, but then there's these phrases, just like these 4 and 5 words that are just such a beautiful phrase, and I'm just kind of like, even if I may be missing the point overall, there's something there that I just reread that line over and over. It's just such a interesting way to combine words. I find that so just lovely. I don't know if it's like sitting with words a little bit longer than I would in like reading a novel or reading a nonfiction book. I'm not going to reread. Well, if I'm paying attention when I'm reading a nonfiction book, I'm not rereading the lines over and over. I only do that when I've stopped paying attention. And poetry is like the opposite. Like when I'm reading and these words just catch my attention, I'm going to reread it over and over and just let it sink in. So I think the reading aspect of it is just completely different too. So I hope if someone's listening to this that hasn't given poetry a try, or is just sort of like, I'm not a poetry person, pick something else up, try it again. Like, you just never know what might hit you.
It's not the poetry you read in high school, is what I like to say. Like, you were forced to read poetry in high school. You might have hated it. And I think folks should give it another try.
And every poet has a different voice and a different approach. And so you may legitimately not like one, but try somebody else.
Yeah. Okay, as we wrap things up, I wanted to just ask you, are there any projects, ideas, things you're excited about with Good Printed, things that you can share now? Are there secrets that you can't share?
I feel like I always have a lot of future hopeful projects. One I can talk about that is in the works now is that Food Memories anthology. This is a project I'm very, very excited about. I took a little break from doing anthologies. So this is the first one we've done in a little bit. I'm working with a guest editor, Dr. Cynthia Greenlee. Very excited about working with her. And we met at a book event in Asheville a few years ago. And that's been another fun collaborative process of multiple conversations of, I feel like we should work together on something. Should we work together on something? What about this thing? And really just kind of waiting for the right pieces to fall into place. But I think I love this one because when you think food memories, there's a little bit of nostalgia that you might go to. But food and meals and ingredients carry every single range of emotion, everything. And we're trying to capture that in this collection. I just saw a book recently that was way more on the very just like chicken soup version of food memories. And I think that's exactly what this is not. I think if that's what you want, you reach for that. This is the humanity. And it's just a single like food lens to get to hear about people's stories. And I've read several of the submissions, and we're still in that selection process right now. But there are so many that have stuck with me and I've thought about after the fact. And to me, that's what makes a good piece of writing. You felt something, you're remembering it, and it's giving you a little window into someone else's experience or their reality. And I just can't wait for that to be out in the world and see. We're in the phase where like cover art is being created. And so I don't even know exactly what this is going to look like yet. We have, direction, we have the artist, but it's like this beautiful, like it hasn't quite crystallized yet into whatever this thing is that it's going to be. And I'm very excited about seeing that kind of take shape over the next couple months.
You're in the best part of the project. That's the kind of ideation and beginning, at least for me. That's what I'm most excited about. Okay, the last question I have for you is, can you share with our audience maybe one thing or two things that a collaborator or a writer has taught you?
I think that working with different collaborators and different artists for these projects is doing exactly what I'm trying to do for the reader. It's giving me a window into someone's art or someone's writing style. And each project has its own personality. I mean, even from a writing standpoint, this particular writer uses a lot of colons. This particular writer uses a lot of dashes. It's like, it's fun to realize that like even rules around writing are not like hard, fast rules. Like your personality shines through. And I think I'm constantly trying to figure out how to better use my voice. And so I'm just watching and getting a front row seat to how writers are doing it and how the artists I work with are showing their style, even when I'm like, here's the direction that we need to go. Here's what we're trying to create, but use your voice. Like let your style show through. That's been really good for me to just watch how other people are doing that in their creative work.
Thanks for listening to Loblolly Press in Conversation. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andrew Mack, from my home in Asheville, North Carolina. This was a unique episode in that we actually got to sit in the same room together. Loblolly Press is proud to be part of a growing network of these independent publishers where I feel like we're really reimagining what Southern literature can be with a focus on queer, BIPOC, rural, and emerging writers, especially at Loblolly Press. You can learn more about our work and the books we publish at loblollypress.com. You can follow us on Instagram at loblolly_press. If you like this episode, please do consider sharing it or leaving a review. You can share on Instagram, you can share with your friends, you can share with your mom. It just helps us, it helps more folks find us, and it helps more folks support the writers we believe in. If you're not already a paid subscriber and you're listening now, you can join us over on Substack for early access to episodes like this one, although we'll still have one episode every month that will come out all at the same time for everyone. We'll also have exclusive previews of upcoming books and 10% off everything we make, including Chapbooks merch and more. Thanks again to Lib from Good Printed Things for joining me, and thank you for being part of this community. Until next time.